While Hollywood churns out explosive blockbusters, where one soldier takes down an entire army, there are war films buried in cinema history that veterans refuse to watch twice because they're too real. These aren't your polished, sanitized battlefield fantasies. War experts, historians, and the soldiers who lived through hell itself have pointed to these forgotten masterpieces and said one word: accurate. Today, we're diving into 15 war films that got it so brutally right, they've been overlooked by audiences who prefer their warfare served with extra heroism and a side of fantasy. Strap in, because authenticity hurts. Hamburger Hill, 1987. Here's the movie nobody talks about because it came out at the worst possible time. Released 9 months after Platoon and 1 month after Full Metal Jacket, Hamburger Hill got buried alive by two giants. But ask anyone who actually served in Vietnam, and they'll tell you this is the one that captured their war. The film follows the 101st Airborne Division's brutal 10-day assault on Hill 937, a worthless piece of dirt that cost 70 American lives. What makes veterans nod in grim recognition isn't the combat scenes, though they're viscerally intense. It's the grunt slang, so authentic they had to add subtitles because civilians couldn't understand it. Historians praise the battle choreography as being frighteningly close to reality. The soldiers don't spout philosophical monologues between firefights. They crack dark jokes, argue about nothing, and deal with fear the way real men did, by ignoring it until they couldn't anymore. One Army-Iraq War veteran said the film has no distracting subplots, only the immediate fight for survival. Director John Irvin, who'd covered the war as a documentarian, knew that Vietnam wasn't about grand strategy or moral awakening. It was about taking a hill, losing friends, and then being ordered to abandon that same hill days later. The film flopped commercially because audiences in 1987 were exhausted by Vietnam stories. But for those who were there, Hamburger Hill remains the most honest depiction of their nightmare. No romanticism, no redemption arcs, just mud, blood, and the question nobody could answer: what the hell were we fighting for? 84. Charlie Mopic, 1989. Long before Blair Witch Project claimed to invent found footage, this indie gem pioneered the format with zero budget and maximum authenticity. The title itself is military jargon, the kind that separates civilians from those who served. 84. Charlie Mopic follows an LRRP team in Vietnam, shot entirely through the camera of a combat cameraman documenting their mission. What starts as routine reconnaissance spirals into a claustrophobic nightmare. Military experts worship this film for one reason: everything is correct. The faulty weaponry that jams at the worst moment, the radio communications that crackle with static and confusion, the way soldiers move through hostile territory with paranoid efficiency. An Iraq War veteran praised the absence of Hollywood nonsense, noting there are no romantic subplots or heroic speeches, just men trying not to die. The dialogue wasn't written in a studio. It was transcribed from actual combat veterans who consulted on the film. When a soldier curses about his M16 jamming, it's because that happened constantly in Vietnam's humid hell. When they debate whether to call in air support or stay silent, you feel the weight of that decision. Shot for less than $1 million, this independent production did what mega-budget films couldn't: capture the terror of not knowing if the next step triggers a mine, the next rustle in the jungle hides an enemy, or the next order leads to an ambush. Director Patrick Duncan, a Vietnam veteran himself, refused to glamorize war. The result is a film so raw and immediate that watching it feels like trespassing on someone's trauma. The Beast of War, 1988. Most war films make you root for your side. This one makes you root for survival, and it doesn't care whose survival that is. The Beast of War traps you inside a Soviet tank during the Afghanistan invasion, following a crew that's become separated from their unit and hunted by Mujahideen fighters. Made while the Soviet-Afghan War was still raging, this film took guts to produce. Director Kevin Reynolds shot in Israel with actual Soviet-modified tanks and weaponry, creating a pressure cooker where the biggest enemy isn't outside but inside the cramped metal coffin. The film accurately depicts the Soviet invasion's brutality, opening with a village massacre that pulls no punches. But it also humanizes the tank crew, showing them as exhausted, terrified young men who signed up for glory and got slaughter instead. Military experts praise the tactical accuracy, from the limited elevation range of Soviet tanks in mountain warfare to the claustrophobic protocols of operating heavy armor in hostile territory. The film's genius is showing both sides as human. The Mujahideen aren't faceless terrorists. They're fighters defending their land. The Soviets aren't cartoon villains. They're soldiers trapped in an unwinnable war. Jason Patric's performance as Kovarchenko, the driver who questions his commander's sanity, grounds the film in moral complexity. Critics noted that the film could be about any tank in any war, which is precisely why it endures. The Beast bombed in America because audiences were too busy being dazzled by Star Wars. But for those who study asymmetric warfare and the hell of mechanized combat, this remains required viewing. It's Das Boot on tracks, with the added weight of knowing that this war was still killing people when the film premiered. A Walk in the Sun, 1945. This film came out before World War II even ended, and soldiers returning from Italy sat in theaters and wept because someone finally got it right. Director Lewis, milestone who'd already made All Quiet on the Western Front, crafted a movie that strips away Hollywood heroics and shows war as the monotonous, terrifying slog it actually was. A platoon lands at Salerno, loses their officers immediately, and spends the next 2 hours walking toward a farmhouse they've been ordered to capture. That's it. No grand battles, no stirring speeches, just walking, waiting, and the occasional burst of violence that kills men in seconds. What makes veterans praise this film is the authenticity of the banter. Soldiers don't philosophize about freedom. They joke about pizza, complain about their feet, and compose letters to family members they might never see again. Richard Conte's cynical machine gunner asking captured Italians where he can find pizza isn't comic relief. It's how men stay sane when insanity surrounds them. The U.S. Army approved the film in 1945, but they requested changes because they worried it made the platoon look aimless. Milestone ignored them and kept the confusion, the fear, the moments where leadership collapses and ordinary men have to step up without preparation. Critics at the time found it too bleak. Audiences expecting patriotic propaganda got a dose of reality instead. War is mostly boredom, punctuated by terror, and the men who fight it are scared kids trying to remember why they're there. Dana Andrews leads with quiet desperation, not heroism. When the final assault comes, it's messy, inefficient, and brutal. Some survive, some don't, and the film refuses to tell you which deaths mattered more. Cross of Iron, 1977. Sam Peckinpah only made one war film, and he made it about the Germans retreating from the Russian front in 1943. That alone makes Cross of Iron a unicorn in cinema. Released the same year as Star Wars, this brutal masterpiece got buried under blockbuster mania despite being Orson Welles' favorite war film since All Quiet on the Western Front. The story follows Sergeant Steiner, a German soldier who doesn't care about glory or ideology. He just wants his men to survive. When an aristocratic Prussian officer arrives desperate to earn an Iron Cross for his own vanity, the clash between survival and ego becomes the film's dark heart. Military historians praise Cross of Iron for its unflinching accuracy. Peckinpah shot in Yugoslavia with real T-34 tanks from the Yugoslav army and authentic German weaponry. The battle scenes use Peckinpah's signature slow-motion violence, but it's not stylized action, it's horror. You watch men die in gruesome detail, and the editing cuts between German and Soviet soldiers dying simultaneously, hammering home that war murders everyone equally. James Coburn's performance as Steiner is one of cinema's great anti-heroes. He's not noble or brave, he's exhausted and cynical, surviving on instinct while his superiors play politics with lives. The film bombed in America, but became a massive hit in Germany, where audiences recognized their own grandfather's stories on screen. Peckinpah was drinking himself to death during production, yet somehow crafted a film that feels more real than most war movies made by sober directors. The climax features Steiner laughing maniacally as stock footage of real war atrocities plays, a middle finger to anyone who thinks war has meaning beyond survival. We Were Soldiers, 2002. While Black Hawk Down dominated headlines in 2002, this film quietly became the most historically accurate portrayal of Vietnam combat on record. Based on the book by Lieutenant General Hal Moore and war correspondent Joe Galloway, We Were Soldiers recreates the Battle of Ia Drang with documentary precision. Moore himself consulted on every detail, from the tactics used to the way soldiers moved under fire. Veterans of Ia Drang who watched the film confirmed that Randall Wallace got it right. The chaos, the terror, the impossible decisions that define combat leadership. What separates this from other Vietnam films is its refusal to take sides on the war's politics. Moore was a believer. The film doesn't judge him for it. Instead, it shows what happens when 400 American soldiers face 2,000 North Vietnamese regulars in the first major battle of the war. Mel Gibson's performance as Moore captures a commander who knows every name in his battalion and feels every death personally. The parallel story of his wife Julia delivering death telegrams to families shows the war's cost on the home front with equal honesty. Military experts praise the film's depiction of tactics, the use of artillery, the coordination of air support, the way units maintain formation under withering fire. When soldiers run out of ammunition and resort to hand-to-hand combat, it's not Hollywood choreography, it's men fighting for their lives with whatever's left. The North Vietnamese aren't faceless enemies, but soldiers equally committed to their cause. The film shows their commander preparing his troops, praying for victory, believing in his mission. This balance makes We Were Soldiers uncomfortable for those who want clear heroes and villains. But for veterans, it's a rare Hollywood film that shows soldiers as professionals doing an impossible job, regardless of whether that job should have existed at all. Lebanon, 2009. Samuel Maoz was the gunner in an Israeli tank during the 1982 Lebanon War. 27 years later, he locked a film crew inside a replica tank and forced audiences to experience his trauma. Lebanon never leaves the tank's interior. The outside world exists only through the gunner's crosshairs, a narrow window to hell. When Israeli forces invade Lebanon, a rookie tank crew accompanies paratroopers into a bombed-out town. Their orders are simple. The execution is nightmare fuel. The film won the Golden Lion at Venice, the highest honor ever given to an Israeli film, and sparked controversy in Israel itself. Military experts praise Lebanon for its brutal honesty about the fog of war. The tank's radio crackles with contradictory orders. The crew can't tell civilians from combatants through their gun sight. When they fire, they see the results in horrifying detail. Bodies torn apart, a mother keening over her dead daughter, the cost of every decision made in split seconds. Critics called it a shooting and crying film, the Israeli term for works that mourn violence while perpetuating it. Maoz doesn't care. His film isn't about politics. It's about four terrified 20-year-olds operating a killing machine they barely understand. The claustrophobia is suffocating. Oil drips from pipes, sweat soaks uniforms, and the tank's interior becomes a coffin shared with a dead comrade and a Syrian prisoner. Maoz used sound design to make viewers feel trapped, from hydraulic whines to the deafening impact of shells hitting armor. When the hatch opens, light floods in like salvation, but they can't leave. The mission isn't done. Veterans of tank warfare call Lebanon the most accurate depiction of their experience ever filmed. Not because of the combat, but because of the waiting, the fear, the way young men lose their innocence one trigger pull at a time. Das Boot, 1981. Wolfgang Petersen locked actors inside a real German U-boat replica for months, and the result became the gold standard for submarine warfare films. Das Boot follows U-96's crew during World War II as they patrol the Atlantic, hunting Allied convoys while being hunted themselves. The film's accuracy is obsessive. Petersen used photos from Lothar Gunther Buchheim, who served on U-96 and wrote the novel. The production built a full-scale submarine and taught actors to move through tight corridors like submariners, training them to respond to depth charges with authentic panic. Military historians worship Das Boot for its technical precision. The submarine operates exactly as real U-boats did. The diesel engines, the diving procedures, the way depth charges create shock waves that crack instruments and test nerves. War History Online notes that the rockets and planes used in filming were real, and British ships served as models for Allied vessels. What makes Das Boot transcendent is its claustrophobia. These men are cut off from the war they're fighting, sealed in a metal tube that could become their tomb at any moment. Morale cracks as patrols drag on with no targets found. Doubts about the Nazi cause grow when propaganda doesn't match reality. The crew isn't ideological. They're professionals who want to survive. The film's genius is making audiences care about German sailors, humanizing men on the wrong side of history without excusing their nation's crimes. When the U-boat finally returns home after a brutal patrol, battered and barely functional, the relief is palpable. Then Allied bombers hit the dock, and the crew dies on land after surviving months at sea. Petersen's message is clear. War doesn't care about your heroism or survival skills. It kills indiscriminately, and victory means nothing to the dead. Restrepo, 2010. This isn't a narrative film, it's a documentary. But war experts insist Restrepo belongs on any list of accurate war depictions because it's raw combat footage shot by journalists embedded with American troops in Afghanistan's Korengal Valley. Directors Tim Hetherington and Sebastian Junger spent a year with 2nd Platoon, Battle Company, filming every firefight, every loss, every moment of tedium between explosions. The platoon is stationed at Outpost Restrepo, named after a medic killed early in deployment. The Korengal Valley is called the deadliest place on Earth, and Restrepo shows why. The soldiers are ambushed constantly, pinned down by Taliban fighters who know the terrain and pick their battles. Restrepo holds no punches. There's no narrator explaining the war's purpose, or soldiers delivering speeches about freedom. Instead, you watch men cope with losing friends, firing back at muzzle flashes they can't see, and wondering if their mission matters. The footage captures the monotony of military life, playing games, joking around, missing home. Then bullets start flying, and the transformation is instant. Military analysts praise Restrepo for showing what combat actually looks like, not Hollywood's choreographed version. Firefights are chaotic. Soldiers scream orders, call for air support, and don't know if they hit anything. After the shooting stops, they process the adrenaline, some laughing hysterically, others shutting down. The film doesn't judge the war or its participants. It simply observes, and that objectivity makes it more powerful than any scripted drama. When Tim Hetherington was killed covering Libya's civil war in 2011, Restrepo became his testament. War is hell, and those who fight it deserve to be seen as they are, not as heroes or villains, but as human beings doing an impossible job. Hacksaw Ridge, 2016. Desmond Doss was a Seventh-day Adventist who refused to carry a weapon during World War II. He became the first conscientious objector to receive the Medal of Honor. Mel Gibson turned his story into a film so graphically violent that veterans of Okinawa said it captured the battle's horror perfectly. Hacksaw Ridge follows Doss from his troubled childhood through boot camp, where soldiers and officers torment him for refusing to touch a rifle, to the Battle of Okinawa, where he saved 75 lives without firing a shot. Military historians praise the film's accuracy in depicting both Doss's struggles and the Pacific Theater's brutality. The boot camp scenes show the real pressure conscientious objectors faced. Officers tried to force Doss out, believing a medic without a weapon endangered everyone. When Doss finally reaches Okinawa, the film shifts into nightmare mode. Gibson doesn't sanitize war. Bodies explode from flamethrowers, rats feast on corpses. Hand-to-hand combat is savage and desperate. Japanese soldiers use caves and tunnels to ambush Americans, and the terrain offers no cover. Doss's son confirmed the film's accuracy, praising its adherence to his father's story, despite Hollywood temptations to embellish. The scene where Doss lowers wounded soldiers down the cliff face one by one actually happened. The prayer he repeated, "Please, Lord, let me get one more," became his mantra. Andrew Garfield's performance captures Doss's quiet faith and stubborn courage, making him heroic without turning him into a superhero. Combat medics who watched the film said it's the most realistic depiction of their job ever made. Medics run toward danger unarmed, treating wounds under fire, and often die doing it. Hacksaw Ridge makes their bravery visible, showing war from the perspective of someone who refuses to kill but can't refuse to help. The Thin Red Line, 1998. Terrence Malick spent 20 years in exile before returning to direct this poetic meditation on the Battle of Guadalcanal. Critics called it a masterpiece or a pretentious mess, depending on whether they value philosophy over action. Military historians called it accurate. John McManus, a respected World War II scholar, graded the thin red line's accuracy at 9 out of 10, praising everything from how soldiers move across battlefields to the individual blades of grass Malick's camera captured. Guadalcanal was the Pacific Theater's forgotten battle, overshadowed by Iwo Jima and Okinawa, despite being equally brutal. Malick's film follows Charlie Company as they assault a fortified Japanese position on a hilltop. The combat is chaotic and slow, nothing like Hollywood's quick edits and clear objectives. Soldiers get lost, orders contradict each other, and men die without meaning. What makes The Thin Red Line unique is Malick's refusal to explain. Characters narrate their thoughts in voiceover, but these aren't tactical observations. They're existential questions. Why does nature thrive while men slaughter each other? What separates glory from murder? The philosophical approach frustrated action fans, but resonated with veterans who remember combat as surreal and disconnected from reality. The film's ensemble cast disappears into roles. Sean Penn plays a cynical sergeant who's seen too much. Jim Caviezel is a soldier questioning everything. Nick Nolte is a colonel willing to sacrifice men for career advancement. Malick shot thousands of hours of footage and cut major stars entirely, prioritizing the film's mood over star power. Guadalcanal veterans praised the jungle's oppressive presence, the heat, the disease, and the way terrain dictated tactics. The Thin Red Line isn't a traditional war film. It's war as experienced by men who survive physically but lose something vital inside. Stalag 17, 1953. Billy Wilder's only war film is about the most overlooked aspect of combat: what happens to those captured. Based on a Broadway play written by two actual prisoners of Stalag 17B in Austria, this film follows American POWs trying to identify a German spy in their barracks. William Holden won an Oscar for playing Sefton, a cynical scrounger who barters with guards for luxuries and becomes the prime suspect when escape attempts fail. Military historians praise Stalag 17 for capturing POW life's daily grind. The boredom, the filth, the desperate attempts to stay sane. The prisoners aren't heroes planning elaborate escapes. They're men passing time until the war ends, if it ever does. They race rats for entertainment, put on Christmas shows where men play women, and trade cigarettes for anything that makes imprisonment bearable. What makes the film remarkable is Wilder's balance of comedy and darkness. The prisoners joke constantly because humor is survival. But underneath the wisecracks, there's real tension. Someone is betraying them, and that someone will die when discovered. Rob Citino, senior historian at the National World War II Museum, calls Stalag 17 one of the war's most accurate films because it depicts the forgotten front: captivity. Most POW films focus on escapes. Wilder focuses on the waiting, the paranoia, the way men turn on each other when trust breaks down. The twist is genuinely surprising because Wilder plays fair with clues while keeping you focused on Sefton. When the spy is revealed and killed by his own side, it's brutal and quick, not heroic. The film ends with Sefton escaping, but most prisoners remain trapped. Their war isn't over. They just keep waiting. Downfall, 2004. Hollywood avoids humanizing Hitler. Oliver Hirschbiegel's downfall doesn't care about Hollywood's rules. This German film depicts Hitler's final days in his Berlin bunker as the Red Army closes in, and historians call it one of the most accurate portrayals of Nazi leadership ever filmed. Bruno Ganz's performance as Hitler is chilling because it avoids caricature. This isn't a ranting madman, it's a sick, defeated tyrant watching his empire collapse. The film shows Hitler's mood swings, his rages, his delusions, and his pathetic end. He's not sympathetic, but he's human, and that's more disturbing than any villainous portrayal. Historians praise Downfall for its meticulous research. The bunker's layout is accurate, based on accounts from survivors. Hitler's final days are reconstructed from multiple testimonies, showing his orders to destroy Germany rather than let it surrender, his marriage to Eva Braun hours before their joint outcome, and the chaos as loyalists fled or took their own lives. The film doesn't glorify or excuse Nazi atrocities. It simply observes how evil collapses when it can't sustain itself anymore. What makes Downfall essential viewing is its refusal to simplify. The bunker contains true believers, opportunists, and those too terrified to leave. Goebbels poisons his children rather than let them live in a non-Nazi world. Others surrender without hesitation. The film shows how ideology breaks down when defeat is certain, yet some cling to it until death. Military experts note the accuracy of the Soviet assault on Berlin. The city is rubble, civilians hide in basements, and soldiers fight street by street. The Red Army isn't shown as liberators but as conquerors, driven by revenge for what Germany did to Russia. Downfall became infamous as an internet meme, with people dubbing Hitler's rants with absurd complaints. But the film itself remains a sobering look at evil's banality and its inevitable downfall. Tora, 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 1970. American and Japanese filmmakers collaborated on this meticulous recreation of Pearl Harbor, and the result is a film so accurate it's used in history classes decades later. Directed by Richard Fleischer, Kinji Fukasaku, and Toshio Masuda, Tora, Tora, Tora tells the story from both sides with equal weight, refusing to vilify the Japanese or glorify the Americans. Military historians worship this film for its obsessive attention to detail. The production used real warships when possible, built exact replicas of aircraft carriers, and recreated Japanese Zero fighters. The attack sequence took months to choreograph, using practical effects that still look better than modern CGI. Every plane movement, every explosion, every tactical decision is based on historical records. What makes Tora, Tora, Tora unique is its lack of heroes. There are no individual protagonists. The film treats Pearl Harbor as a massive military operation involving thousands of people making small decisions that added up to catastrophe. American commanders ignored warning signs. Japanese pilots executed orders with precision. The attack succeeded not because of brilliance, but because of American complacency and Japanese preparation. The film's Japanese dialogue is subtitled, not dubbed, preserving authenticity. Japanese filmmakers handled their country's scenes, ensuring cultural accuracy. Admiral Yamamoto's famous line about awakening a sleeping giant is included because it's historically documented. Critics at the time called Tora, Tora, Tora boring because it lacks melodrama. Veterans and historians call it essential because it treats war as history, not entertainment. The film flopped commercially, but earned respect as the definitive Pearl Harbor film. When Michael Bay made Pearl Harbor 30 years later, Critics and historians alike pointed to Tora, Tora, Tora as proof that accuracy and drama can coexist without betraying either. Come and See, 1985. War films make heroes. Come and See makes survivors. Soviet director Elim Klimov created a film so disturbing that Ronald Reagan and Neil Kinnock reportedly changed their views on nuclear war after watching it. Set in Belarus during World War II, Come and See follows a young boy who joins partisan fighters and witnesses the systematic destruction of his homeland by Nazi forces. This isn't war, it's genocide. Klimov insisted his film be realistic to the maximum, and every frame proves it. The protagonist ages decades in 2 hours, not through makeup, but through trauma. Actor Alexei Kravchenko was hypnotized for certain scenes because the psychological toll was too much. The film's depiction of Nazi atrocities is historically accurate, showing the burning of villages with civilians inside, the Einsatzgruppen death squads, the way entire populations were erased. Historians confirm these events happened exactly as shown. The Katyn massacre, where 149 villagers were locked in a barn and burned alive, is recreated with documentary precision. Come and See is less a narrative film than an endurance test. The sound design assaults viewers with constant noise, gunfire, explosions, ringing ears. The camera never flinches, forcing you to watch horrors without cutaways or music to soften the blow. The final sequence, where the boy fires at a portrait of Hitler and historical footage plays in reverse, suggests that undoing Hitler's birth might undo the war. But the film knows that's fantasy. Evil isn't one man. It's systems, ideologies, and ordinary people who choose cruelty. Film critics call Come and See one of the greatest films ever made, and one nobody wants to watch twice. Veterans of the Eastern Front confirmed it captured the war's true face. Not battles between armies, but the annihilation of humanity. The Soviets delayed releasing the film for years, worried it was too bleak. Klimov didn't care. He'd witnessed the war as a child, and he refused to lie about what he saw. Come and See is the ultimate anti-war film because it doesn't debate war's morality. It just shows what war does to people, especially children, and lets you sit with that horror. These films won't show up on Netflix's trending page. They don't feature superhero soldiers or happy endings, but every historian, veteran, and expert who studies warfare points to these forgotten masterpieces and says the same thing. This is what it was really like. From the mud of Guadalcanal to the rubble of Berlin, from tank warfare in Afghanistan to submarine hell under the Atlantic, these films don't glorify war. They document it. So here's the controversial question. Why do we prefer Hollywood's sanitized heroism over actual veterans' experiences? Why do films that get war right get forgotten while Michael Bay explosion fests dominate the box office? Drop your take in the comments, especially if you've served or studied military history. Which forgotten war film do you think deserves more recognition? And which modern war movies do you think completely miss the mark? Let's have that conversation, because if we're going to make films about war, the least we owe those who fought is honesty.